So my theory is the timeline, like in a science fiction movie, the timeline has split twice in the last like 9 months.
What was the first split?
There was when Trump got shot.
And
and there was that moment where the world was going to head in two totally different directions.
Right. If he got hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we saw the most conspicuous display of physical bravery I've ever seen.
Right.
In that moment. Exactly. Yeah. And it could have gone, horrifically badly for the entire world after that. So that was timeline split number one. So that other timeline's out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't want to visit it.
Boy, imagine being stuck there. What kind of horrible karma?
No.
I mean, that's a totalitarian dystopian nightmare.
That's the bad place.
Yeah.
And then timeline split again on Election Day.
I know you fancy a good conspiracy theory.
Yes.
And that gentleman being able to pull off what he did and, the way it happened, the way it all went down it's a Lee Harvey Oswald 2.0.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. The shooter. And that we still don't know anything.
There's no call for disclosure.
Yeah.
There's no call for a press conference. There's no toxicology report. The toxicology report had to have been done.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to know like what kind of stuff this kid is on that made him want to do that, or if anything?
Yeah. So my theory is it's almost as if people want us to think it's a conspiracy. Like it's almost like the whole thing is almost orchestrated. Like it's so strange. This is like the rapid cremation. Like the whole thing was just completely bizarre. And then you're exactly right. Like no hearings, no nothing. Now, having said that, I expect that this will change. Right. So.
Do you think they're going to do a dive into what happened?
I mean, I would. I don't know if they will, but I certainly would if I was in a position to do that.
I wonder what they can actually find. I mean, I don't know if they wanted it to be a conspiracy that people talked about, or if that's simply the best way to pull it off.
Yeah, or it's just as we saw, I think in the hearing afterwards, maybe just a systemic collapse of competence.
There's also a confidence in the fact that the news timeline today is so rapid. When things are relevant and people are paying attention to them, is you have a couple of days. Yeah. Even with an assassination attempt on a former president. Yeah. Where people were murdered. Yeah. And it's in and out.
Yeah, that's right. I think the news cycle now is like a 2 to 3 day social media firestorm, and we just cycle from one to the next.
Yeah.
And we have the memory of goldfish, and things that would have been era defining just come and go with astonishing speed and shock. By the way, I should say I don't think there was I doubt there was a conspiracy. I think anything's possible. I think it's just we have a confidence collapse, and I think we saw that on display when the director at the time testified.
Well, there's all the elements that it could have been a conspiracy.
It could have, but this is kind of the thing, which is this like it also could have been systemic confidence collapse, and then it's like, okay, would it be better off for the institute, if it looks like a conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
Which world? Okay, two timelines. Which world would you rather live in? The one with the conspiracies, or the one with just like incompetence everywhere?
Well, I think you have both simultaneously. Right. I don't think it's binary.
Right.
I think there's incompetence everywhere, and conspiracies are legitimate. They're real.
Yeah.
And that one seems like conspiracy. The fact that his house was professionally scrubbed. There's no social media record of this kid online. There's no nothing.
He's the only kid of his generation who's that fired up about politics to have no online footprint.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
And he's a registered Republican. Like, the whole thing is, like, so weird.
And he was, like, a bad shooter, and then he became a great shooter. And
well, he definitely trained.
Yeah, right.
Like, you could train someone to become a good shooter. But, like, this is all you have to do.
But that's
Don't move and do that.
Right.
Get all your mechanics in place. Right. Understand technique and positioning, breathing. It's not like the most complicated thing from a prone position. Right. But the fact that he chose to use iron sights, I thought was weird too. Yeah. There's a lot of weirdness to it. Yeah. From 140 yards with a scope, that is an easy shot. Yeah.
Well, then he could just like wander up.
That's the different timeline. The different timeline is he has a scope, and that's it.
Okay. All right. Right. That would have.
And Trump's dead.
Yep.
And then, boy, do we live in a crazy world then.
Yeah. Completely bizarre.
I mean, what does the streets look like right now? Yeah. What kind of like protests and riots and you think January 6th was nuts? Yes. If they had killed Trump, that would be January 6th on steroids everywhere. Yeah. That's right, and we would experience it. I mean, I don't know. When I was a kid, my high school history teacher got us a bootleg copy of the Zapruder film. Really?
Right, which was like
what a gangster high school history teacher.
He was actually pretty focused on he really loved the Kennedy assassination, so we spent a lot of time on that. And you kind of watch it frame by frame, and you can kind of see what's happening. But there's lots of questions. But like when things like that happen, today, it's going to be in high definition 4K ultra surround sound. forever.
Yeah.
Right. Playing out in real time forever. And so like I very much don't want to live in the world where those things happen.
Well, we are very fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, after the election, I was like, wow, voting works.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. How about that?
Hey, voting works. That's nice. Like
Yes.
they don't have the system completely rigged.
Yeah.
And then, but they kind of tried to rig it, at least with the media. Where the real rigging in the 2020 elections, I mean, you can cast all your conspiracies upon it in terms of like mail-in ballots and all this jazz, but the real rigging was the collusion between social media companies and the government to suppress information that would have altered the effect of the election.
Yeah.
That's legitimate.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was like direct interference, and it was aided and abetted by a lot of former intelligence officials, and by the current administration. Tons of pressure on censorship coming from this the current administration and all their kind of arms of the censorship apparatus.
You have your hands in the tech community.
Yeah.
You have your fingers in all that jazz.
Yeah.
Like, what was the general attitude about all that stuff when it was revealed? How did people, how did your peers respond to that?
I think anybody in social media, the internet companies knew it. So I think it was pretty widely understood. I mean, look, there's nothing that happened at Twitter in the Twitter files that wasn't happening all the other companies, right?
Right.
And so it's a consistent pattern. If you got the YouTube files, they would look exactly the same. And of course, we should get the YouTube files,
sure.
right? And now we probably will now with this new administration is probably going to carve all this stuff open, but. Yeah, no, look, it was a pattern. And then look, the companies bear a lot of responsibility and the people in the companies, made a lot of, I think, bad judgment calls. But the government, the Biden White House was directly exerting censorship pressure on American companies to censor American citizens, which I think, by the way, is just flatly illegal. Like, I think is actually subject to criminal charges. Like, I think there are people with criminal liability who were involved in this. So there was that. There were also members of Congress doing the same thing, which is also illegal. And then there was a lot of funding of outside third-party groups that were bringing a lot of pressure down on censorship.
Yeah.
And just an example of that is there's a unit at Stanford, right next door, to us that, was the internet censorship unit that was funded by the U.S. government.
Wow.
And exerted tremendous pressure on the companies to censor. And it was very effective at doing so.
Does it smell like sulfur when you walk those halls?
It is very dark and grim. This whole thing is very bad. And so
Stanford.
Oh yeah, Stanford. Stanford, by the way, another unit like that at Harvard. A bunch of universities got pulled into this. A lot of NGOs and nonprofits got pulled into this. And so the Twitter files showed us kind of the basic roadmap. And then there's this thing called the Weaponization Committee that Congressman Jordan is running that has also revealed a lot of this. But I would imagine the new Trump administration is going to come in and carve all that wide open. And I know that there are people being appointed to senior positions who are very determined to do that.